Hey guys, this is Ray with Benchmark, and today we're going to be talking about networks for RTK corrections. A couple of weeks ago, I made a video on what you need to do GPS RTK work, but today what I want to talk about is all the different network options that are available in the United States and in Canada. We'll do a separate video on international networks, but today we're going to focus on those too. So let's get into it. Lots of people ask me every single week, what network should I use? Why should I use a network? How much do networks cost? All these things. So we wanted to make a video that describes exactly what you should be getting and why. So you should use a network if you're in an area with great coverage, if you don't have a base station, and if your specific GPS works well with the network that you're choosing to work with. If those three characteristics are followed, then a network could be a good solution for you. But if they're not, or any one of those three are not, you should not use a network and you should use a base instead. So before we jump into the different network options in Canada and the United States, I want to mention all the limitations that come with networks so that you can make a really informed decision. So first, a lot of networks will have mount points. What a mount point is a base station that has been put up by a company to allow your network rover to connect to it without having your own base receiver. The issue with that is if those mount points are too far away, then you can get a poor solution. So I was talking to a customer on Vancouver Island in Canada, in British Columbia, and they were working in a part of the island where they didn't have a mount point that was close enough to where they were working. So they couldn't actually use their network rover, and they called me because they needed to upgrade to a base rover option. So before you decide to purchase a network rover, make sure that everywhere that you're going to be working has really good coverage. What close enough means changes a little bit from network to network, but generally you want to be within 5 kilometers of your closest base station. Number 2, and this again varies dramatically from network to network, some are better, some are worse, but the constellations, the satellites that you're seeing might not be the same constellations that you have the ability to see with your network rover. So what that means is you have a base that's right here and it's put up by a company. That base might be out of date compared to your network rover that you buy. So even though your network rover is phenomenal, it's the holy grail of network rovers at this time, and can see all the available satellites and all the available frequencies, if the network you're on is limited, your rover will be limited by association. So when you're looking at getting a network rover, check the network that you're using to make sure that it's a good network that has as many constellations as you see fit for the survey that you're doing. And if you need help, you can always call me and I'll walk you through your different options. So with that, let's hop into the different network options. So we're going to do Canada first. So in Canada, we have 3 main networks. We have BrantNet, CanNet, and SmartNet. BrantNet is made by Brant and Topcon, and it has a lot of limitations. If you're using Topcon gear specifically, then it still will work quite well, but if you're using other brands, it's not phenomenal. SmartNet is your second option, and that's made by Leica. That's actually a quite good network, and it has decent coverage throughout Canada and the United States, and it can work with Leica gear. It can also work with hemisphere and geomeasure gear, and I've actually had a lot of success with that. It's quite good. And then finally in Canada, we have CanNet, which is made by Trimble. Now, Trimble has a good network in the sense that it produces good signals and they see good satellites, but you might have a little bit of issue with working with gear that's not Trimble based. The hemisphere and the geomeasure are the only other 2 receivers that I know works with the Trimble network. I can't speak to the other receivers. Now, something to consider with all Canadian networks is you have to pay a subscription. This can be by the minute, by the week, by the month, by the year. Obviously, the longer time that you're using it, the cheaper it is. But generally speaking, it's about $3,000 a year. So they're about $3,000 per receiver. So if you're a team with multiple receivers that are working in a localized area, it's probably more economical to set up your own network. And I'll explain how to do that at the very end of the video. So keep watching. So moving on to the United States, they have a lot more options when it comes to free public access networks, and they are generally considered cores networks or state networks. Now, we're gonna have a running banner of a bunch of different states that have free access listed below, but essentially these can be set up by any provider and the state pays for your subscription. So all you need to do is create a username and a password and connect your Rover to it. I was just helping one of our customers out in Wisconsin connect to it, and I think it took him about 20 minutes, and then he was up and running, ready to go. Now, in the states where there isn't a public network, you can get a subscription just like in Canada. Some noticeable ones are SpiderNet, which is made by Leica, so it's the American equivalent to SmartNet, and then there's also a Trimble network down in the States as well. And they're about the same cost as the Canadian networks, but in American dollars, and those are a good option if you're in urban, localized areas and you're always going to have phenomenal connection to your network. So there's a bonus network that we haven't mentioned yet, and it's called Point One, and it has less precision at the moment, but it's consistently getting better, and it's agnostic. So it works with all different kinds of devices. I've actually spoken to some C-suite executives at Point One, and they're a great team. I think they're going to be doing great things, but they're just emerging on the scene as a new player in networks. So you might want to check that out because their prices are more competitive. And then finally, like I mentioned earlier in the video, sometimes the best option is to create your own network. So the way that I would recommend doing that is by using something called Stormcaster. It was actually created by Benchmark. It's essentially just a line of code that allows your base to set up as your own private network. And then you can have all your receivers connected to your base. Some advantages of this are a really great distance compared to using typical radio or UHF signals, as well as you have complete control over your network. So the constellation issue that we mentioned at the beginning of the video is nullified. Local mount point issue is also nullified because you get to choose where your mount point is situated in real life. And if you have multiple rovers in a, let's say a 50 kilometer or 20-mile radius, then they can all be connected to the same base. So it can be a lot more affordable and get the exact same or better solution than being on a network. So finally, like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, often the best solution is to have a base in Rover, but to set up your base as a network base. Now, if you want to know more about that, we would use Stormcaster here at Benchmark, and I'm sure they're going to populate a video around here, but essentially it just allows your base to broadcast RTK via the internet. So it gives you more range and complete autonomy over your system, but I'll let the guys in those other videos explain how it works. So based off of everything we just learned in the video, let's walk through together and decide which network is best for you. So first, you need to decide, are you running Leica, Trimble, Topcon, Hemisphere, GeoMeasure, and then make a decision off of that. I would always recommend using a Hemisphere or a GeoMeasure because I know for a fact that they work on all the networks that were listed, and I can't speak to every single other brand. Second, you need to know exactly where you're working all the time. So make sure that you have really good coverage wherever you're going to be working, not just on your local area, but anywhere that you could get called out to a job. And then finally, you need to consider performance versus cost. So a lot of the time, paid subscription networks are going to outperform public or free networks, but that can vary dramatically by state and by coverage. And again, in my opinion, your best option always is to create your own network. So if you're not sure which network you should use, give me a call. I'm Ray or Rayal, and I'm happy to talk shop with you, or I'll see you in this next video.